Duncan Cartledge Online, Insights for Construction Professionals. Welcome to this latest episode of the Duncan Cartledge Online podcast, the online resource for construction professionals. Duncan Cartledge offers more than 9 hours of video presentations that are available 24/7 for just £7 a month. Please remember to subscribe through your usual podcast provider so you don't miss out on any updates, and be sure to visit our YouTube channel for additional content. It's great to have you with us again for yet another episode, and as always I'm joined by Barney, my red Labrador, who helps keep an eye on things and very occasionally offers some invaluable advice. Both Barney and I would be delighted if you could take a moment to write a review, because your feedback does mean a lot to us. If this is your first time listening to a Duncan Cartledge Online podcast, welcome. Please remember to subscribe and catch up on our previous episodes. To our existing subscribers, thank you very much for your continued support. Please help us by spreading the word about the podcasts. In this jam-packed episode, Barney and I will be looking at getting the numbers wrong again, banning retention won't work, and Grenfell justice getting closer. So, let's kick off with estimating getting the numbers wrong again. This week has been somewhat of an humiliation for the competency of UK construction and civil engineering. To quote the great Homer Simpson, "Oh, it just gets worse and worse." I have often shared my concerns on the competency of the UK construction. Recently, HS2 admitted, and I quote, "It got the numbers wrong," as the Birmingham train depot was finally let at more than 3 times the original £250 million budget, with a revised price tag of £856 million, which means costs for the project have gone up by nearly 250%. And bear in mind, this is only the initial budget, so we can expect the final bill to be way over £1 billion. Or am I being cynical? In a statement to Building Magazine, HS2 admitted that mistakes had been made estimating the scale of the job. In another attempt to shift blame, they said the project had also been hit by price inflation that has affected construction over the past few years. But surely, we all know costs rise over time, so shouldn't some allowance have been made for this? The government announced in its latest update in the scheme that more than £43 billion has been spent on building HS2 to date. That's up from £37.6 billion announced in July. Perhaps Bent Flubier, excuse my pronunciation, was right in his book Mega Projects and Risk when he called for custodial sentences. Yes, you heard that right. Banged up for professionals being compliant in dodgy estimating as a means to get approval for multi-million-pound projects such as HS2, from which of course they will earn mega fees. I must admit I have witnessed some, let's say, talking up of the need for projects in my time. For example, I was living in Kent when HS1 was proposed on the basis that trains would be running several times an hour, 24 hours a day. The reality is, of course, somewhat different. When I started my professional career, the preparation of estimates was something that only the boss was allowed to do, as it was thought that the consequences of making a mistake were just too great to think about. Too low and you face embarrassing questions when the tenders are returned. Too high and you kill the job off. I was taught around this time that one of the key skills of a QS was to include undisclosed parcels of money for risks, contingency, bunts, call it what you like, in estimates and bill of quantities to cover the cost of unknown unknowns. So when the inevitable happened and the extras had to be accommodated, the QS would wave a magic wand and hey presto, the problem was solved. Of course we now have NRM1, perhaps the most accepted volume of the NRM suite, which suggests that there are 3 ways to prepare approximate estimates. The elemental method of estimating is a budget setting technique that considers the major elements of a building and provides an order of cost estimate based on the elemental breakdown of a building project. Ordinarily, the group elements and the elements used in the elemental method are the same as those used in the elemental cost planning process. However, the big problem with this approach is that the choice and number of elements used to break down the cost of building works will very much be dependent on the information available, which of course can be variable to say the least. Next, we have the functional unit method, a rough budget setting technique that consists of selecting a suitable standard functional unit for use for the project and multiplying the projected number of units by an appropriate cost per functional unit. For example, hotels, cost per bedroom, car parks, cost per parking space. I must admit, inclusion of the functional unit approach was a surprise, as I've always thought this to be limited to a simple repetitive models or as a ballpark check for other methods. And finally, the floor area method. The total gross internal floor area of the building or buildings is measured using the current RICS Code of Measurement Practice, which I am assured is currently being revised with a new edition due this year, as the IPMS has been largely ignored by surveyors. The gross internal floor area is multiplied by an appropriate cost per square metre, provided, of course, you can find one. And then, of course, there's approximate quantities, which is widely used, but excluded from NOM1, I presume, because the measurement rules vary so widely from person to person. When it comes to mega projects, problems in forecasting the budget are many and varied. Mega projects get bigger and bigger, and they cost more and more. You may have seen the headline in the I newspaper recently that reported that HS2 will now cost more than the Artemis moon mission. In addition, increasingly mega projects don't deliver on the promised benefits. For example, in the case of HS2, large parts of the scheme were cut, and train speeds are now to be reduced. In addition, they take much longer. With such a dismal track record, why do we keep doing it? There is a view that the initial estimate should be viewed as a down payment. It was revealed this week that scrapping the whole project, that's HS2, was not an option, as it would cost more to scrap it than the amount already invested. Talk about rock and a hard place. Trains will not run until 2036 at the earliest. Everything civil engineering related in the UK is mind-numbingly expensive. For example, Lower Thames Crossing between £10 and £12 billion for 14 miles of motorway and 2 fairly short tunnels under the Thames. Projected cost for Heathrow Airport expansion. Pick a figure and double it. Northern Powerhouse Rail. To date, £1.1 billion has been expended just to do initial project work, not actually build anything, just to look at the project. So where's the money going? Presumably on studies, plans and consultants. The National Audit Office commented recently on the Northern Powerhouse Rail project that the government has not yet set up any appropriate governance arrangements between the national and local level or between the different central government departments responsible for delivering the programme's benefits, which really doesn't fill you with confidence, does it? Bent Flubier, once again, excuse my pronunciation, eat your heart out. Add to the mix a civil service that are basically incapable of running anything, and welcome to the world of out-of-control spending. The National Audit Office drew attention to several areas which the Department of Transport needs to address or where it needs to provide more focus. For example, there is a lack of clear strategic business cases which states the economic analysis and the estimated benefits of new railways. Such cases may have identified errors in the early analysis of Phase 1 of HS2, which led to an initial cost-benefit ratio of 2 to 4.1 being revised sharply downwards. Economic assumptions need to reflect, which has not been the case so far, significant changes in the case of new railways to passenger behaviour, in the initial economic cycle, for example, the spread of hybrid working, as well as the use of new technologies. And finally, the department needs more program management capacity and skilled staff. In a review released on the 21st of May, the Competition and Markets Authority published a damning final report entitled Civil Engineering Market Study, which included 19 recommendations, some of which are marked critical. Two areas were particularly highlighted. Procurement and contracting do not consistently drive long-term value. Weaknesses in scoping, engagement, project design and evaluation raise bid costs, reduce competition, and underweight quality, deliverability, innovation, and whole-life costs. Also highlighted is demand and supply-side dynamics. Due to the large amount of subcontracting, this has resulted in poor market outcomes over a sustained period of time, resulting in costs are high and have been increasing in real terms, cost and time overruns are common, quality is variable, and innovation is constrained, including investment in new technologies and processes. It certainly is food for thought. And now, a quick look at banning retention. Over the past 30 years or so, there have been almost 40 payment initiatives relating to construction, legislation, regulations, government select committee reports, charters and codes. Yet, we continue to live with widespread payment abuse. Will the government's proposals for legislation, announced on the 24th of March, make any difference? In March 2026, the Department for Business and Trade published its response to last year's late payment consultation. One point which has grabbed the attention of the construction industry is the government's proposal to ban retention payments under construction contracts. The government's preference is an outright ban on retention payments, in keeping with the principles of good payment practice set out in the Construction Playbook and the prompt payment obligations under the Procurement Act 2023. However, many employers, typically main contractors, have long relied upon retentions, and that reliance has only grown as regulatory and quality standards become more stringent, with greater accountability for the safety and compliance of works through legislation such as the Building Safety Act 2022. Apparently, New Mexico has been the only jurisdiction to ban retentions. Other jurisdictions have legislated to place retentions in trust in separate accounts or with a third-party stakeholder. The New Mexico legislation has failed abjectly because lawyers have found myriad ways around it. For example, payments are contractually scheduled so that there is a close-out payment on completion of the work. Any legislation banning retentions will be bedeviled by avoidance problems, giving rise to countless disputes. If any ban fails, the likelihood of revisiting the legislation could be remote. Select, representing electrical contractors in Scotland, recently announced that its preferred solution for retentions is to be placed in a ring-fenced deposit scheme. The challenge, it would seem, for government is striking a balance between safeguarding parties from unfair retention practices and ensuring employers retain the contractual tools they need to deliver quality, safe and compliant buildings. And now moving on to the inaugural Fair Chance Week urged employers to recruit people with criminal records. Now, we all know that skills shortages and an ageing workforce are big problems in UK construction, but this week saw a novel solution to the problem by opening up access to work for people with criminal records. Apparently, 1 in 4 working-age adults in the UK has a criminal record, yet fewer than 1 in 5 employers actively recruit people with convictions, described as an overlooked talent pool. Evidence shows that employment is one of the strongest drivers for reducing reoffending. Ministry of Justice data shows that only 31% of people are in work 6 months after being released from custody, despite employment being consistently linked to lower reoffending rates. Unite 1K campaign is a major initiative by the Fair Chance Business Alliance to encourage 1,000 UK employers to adopt inclusive hiring practices for people with criminal records by April 2029. It's thought that construction is uniquely positioned to benefit from fair chance hiring. The sector already values practical skills, on-site learning, and progression through experience, factors that suit candidates who may not have traditional employment histories. Employers that have adopted inclusive recruitment practices report strong loyalty, high retention, and motivated workforces, all critical to improving productivity. And finally, up to 57 individuals and 20 companies could face criminal charges over the Grenfell Tower disaster, the Metropolitan Police has said. Potential offences under consideration include corporate gross negligence, manslaughter, fraud, health and safety breaches, and misconduct in public office. In an update at New Scotland Yard, the force said it would submit evidence files to the Crown Prosecution Service by the end of September this year. A final decision on whether to bring charges could take up to 2027, that's 10 years after the fire in West London that killed 72 people. If the CPS does decide to prosecute, any trials are unlikely to begin before 2029. A spokesman for Grenfell United, which represents some of the bereaved families and survivors, said the development was an important step in the process which had already taken far too long. Well, that's all for this episode. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you for listening right to the end. As usual, Barney and I think your stamina is world class. And don't worry, we will find that major prize. This has been another episode from Duncan Cartledge Online. We'd really appreciate it if you could help us by spreading the word, subscribing, and, if you have the time, writing a review. Until next time, thank you for your continued support and take care.